Welcome to Nightmare Fuel Stories, the watching hours I never wanted the night shift at Meridian Tower. Nobody does, but when bills pile up and rent comes due, you take what you can get. Just monitor the cameras and make your rounds every 2 hours, my supervisor explained during my brief orientation. Nothing ever happens here at night, easiest job you'll ever have. Meridian Tower is one of those glass and steel monstrosities that dot the downtown skyline, 52 floors of offices, meeting rooms, and empty corridors that echo when you walk through them after dark. During the day, it's filled with the ambient noise of corporate life, keyboards clicking, phones ringing, the hum of conversation. But at night, it's a different world entirely. My first week passed without incident. I'd arrive at 10 p.m., relieve the evening guard, and settle in behind the security desk with my thermos of coffee. The building emptied by 11, and then it was just me, the janitors who finished up around midnight, and the gentle hum of the ventilation system. The security office was a cramped room adjacent to the main lobby, with windows overlooking the entrance and a wall of monitors displaying feeds from the building's 128 cameras. Most showed empty hallways, stairwells, and office spaces. I'd scan them periodically, make my rounds, and fill out my hourly reports. Between these tasks, I'd read or catch up on podcasts to stay awake. It was during my second week that I first noticed something odd. I was scanning the monitors around 2 a.m. when my eyes caught movement on camera 47, a hallway on the 37th floor. Just a flicker like someone walking past the camera. I leaned forward, watching closely, but saw nothing else. Probably just a shadow from a passing car's headlights outside, I thought. The building stood near a highway and light sometimes played tricks through the windows. I noted it in my log and continued my shift. 3 nights later, I saw it again. This time on camera 62, a conference room on the 41st floor. A shadow moving across the wall. I switched to that camera feed and enlarged it on the main monitor. Nothing there now. Just an empty conference room with chairs neatly tucked under a long table. Getting jumpy already, Miller, I muttered to myself. It was a common affliction among night guards. The isolation and quiet played tricks on your mind. The following night, I decided to check the 41st floor during my 2 a.m. rounds. The elevator ride was silent except for the soft ding as I passed each floor. When the doors opened to 41, I stepped into darkness. Motion sensors activated the hallway lights as I moved, creating a bubble of illumination that traveled with me while darkness closed in behind. The conference room from camera 62 was halfway down the corridor. I unlocked it with my master key and flipped on the lights. Everything looked normal, chairs in place, whiteboard clean, blinds drawn over the floor-to-ceiling windows. I walked the perimeter, checking behind the door and under the table, feeling increasingly foolish. Nothing. I locked up and continued my rounds, but something felt off. The back of my neck prickled like I was being observed. I kept turning around, expecting to see someone behind me, but the hallway remained empty. Back at the security desk, I reviewed the footage from when I'd been on the 41st floor. There I was, moving through the hallway, entering the conference room. Nothing unusual. But as I watched myself leave the room and continue down the hall, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. A shadow on the wall behind me, moving independently of my own. I rewound and played it again. There it was, a dark silhouette that seemed to follow about 10 feet behind me, keeping pace. But when I turned around during my rounds, there had been nothing there. I told myself it was just a glitch in the camera, or maybe a trick of the light. Security systems weren't perfect, especially ones as old as Meridian Towers. I made a note to have maintenance check camera 62 and tried to put it out of my mind. But over the next few nights, I kept seeing these anomalies, shadows moving in empty rooms, lights flickering in offices that should have been locked and powered down. Once, I could have sworn I heard footsteps echoing down a corridor during my 4 a.m. rounds, but when I called out, only silence answered. I started dreading the hours between 2 and 4 a.m., what paranormal enthusiasts call the dead time. That's when the occurrences seemed most frequent. I began taking more detailed notes, trying to establish patterns. Camera 47, 37th floor, 2:17 a.m., shadow crossing hallway. Camera 62, 41st floor, 3:03 a.m., movement by conference table. Camera 84, 49th floor, 2:51 a.m., light turning on in corner office. After 2 weeks of this, I decided to review historical footage. The security system kept recordings for 30 days, so I could check if these anomalies had been happening before I started working here. I spent hours going through old recordings, focusing on the cameras and times where I'd noted strange occurrences, and what I found disturbed me deeply. These things had been happening every night, like clockwork. Same locations, same approximate times, and none of the previous night guards had noted them in their logs. Either they hadn't noticed or they'd chosen not to report them. I considered bringing it up with my supervisor but quickly dismissed the idea. What would I say? I think the building might be haunted. That would be a fast track to unemployment. Instead, I decided to investigate further on my own. The following night, I brought extra equipment, a personal camera with night vision capability, an EMF meter I'd ordered online because why not, and a digital voice recorder. I felt ridiculous like some amateur ghost hunter, but I needed to know if I was imagining things. During my 2 a.m. rounds, I headed straight for the 37th floor, where I'd seen the most activity on camera 47. The hallway was silent as I stepped off the elevator, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The motion-activated lights flickered on, illuminating the corporate artwork and directional signs on the walls. I set up my camera on a small tripod, pointing it down the hallway, and placed the voice recorder beside it. The EMF meter I kept in my hand, watching its lights remain steady in the normal range. Then I stepped around the corner, out of sight but close enough to hear if anything happened. For 20 minutes, nothing did. I was about to pack up and move to another location when the EMF meter suddenly spiked, its lights flashing red. Simultaneously, the temperature around me dropped noticeably. I could see my breath fogging in the air. From around the corner came a sound, the soft scuff of shoes on carpet. I froze, listening intently. Another footstep, then another. Slow, deliberate steps moving past where I'd set up my camera. Fighting every instinct to run, I peered around the corner. The hallway was empty. The motion-activated lights were on, which meant something had triggered them. My camera stood undisturbed on its tripod, still recording, but there was no one there. I approached cautiously, checking the camera to make sure it was still recording. The EMF meter in my hand had returned to normal levels, and the temperature was rising again. I collected my equipment with shaking hands and hurried back to the security office. Once there, I immediately checked the building's security footage. Camera 47 showed me setting up my equipment and stepping around the corner. Then, about 20 minutes in, the motion-activated lights flickered as if responding to movement, but there was nothing visible moving through the hallway. I switched to my personal camera footage, which had a different angle. As it played, I leaned forward, squinting at the screen. There, a distortion in the air like heat waves rising from hot asphalt. It moved through the frame, roughly human-shaped but transparent. And as it passed, the audio picked up that scuffing sound I'd heard, footsteps without a visible source. I felt the hair on my arms stand up. This wasn't a camera glitch or a trick of the light. Something was in the building with me at night, something that didn't show up clearly on cameras, but could interact with the physical environment enough to trigger motion sensors. I checked the voice recorder next. For the most part, it had only captured the ambient sounds of the building, the hum of the ventilation, the distant rumble of the elevator machinery. But right when the EMF meter had spiked, there was something else, a whisper, barely audible. Watching, always watching. I played it again, turning up the volume. The voice was raspy, genderless, and sent chills down my spine. Watching, always watching. What was watching? Who was watching? Was it talking about itself or about me? I spent the rest of my shift huddled at the security desk, obsessively scanning the camera feeds, jumping at every shadow. When 6 a.m. finally came, I practically ran from the building, grateful for the early morning light and the first trickle of employees arriving for work. That day, instead of going straight home to sleep, I went to the public library and researched Meridian Tower. The building was relatively new, constructed in 2001, so I didn't expect to find any tragic historical events or Indian burial grounds beneath it. But what I did find was a small article from 2009 about a security guard who had died on duty. Martin Geller, age 42, had been found at the bottom of a stairwell between the 47th and 48th floors. The official report ruled it an accident. He had apparently tripped and fallen down the stairs during his rounds. But one detail caught my eye. He had been found at 3:27 a.m., well into the dead time, when I'd been experiencing the strange phenomena. I dug deeper and found a few more incidents over the years. A cleaning lady who claimed she quit because someone was following her through the building at night. A maintenance worker who reported hearing voices in the ventilation system. And most recently, 3 months ago, my predecessor had quit suddenly without giving notice. None of this was conclusive, but it suggested I wasn't the first to experience strange things in Meridian Tower. That night I almost called in sick, but I needed the job, and part of me, the rational, skeptical part, still thought there might be a logical explanation. So I returned for my shift, armed with my makeshift ghost hunting equipment and a new determination to get to the bottom of things. The evening started quietly. I made my first rounds at midnight without incident. The janitors left and I was alone in the building. I kept a close eye on the camera feeds, particularly the ones where I'd previously noted activity. At 1:58 a.m. I saw it again, that same distortion in the air on camera 84, the 49th floor corner office. According to my notes, this was where lights had turned on unexpectedly. I grabbed my equipment and headed for the elevator. The 49th floor housed the executive offices of Meridian Financial, the building's primary tenant. I'd never been up there during the day, but I knew from the building plans that the corner office belonged to the CEO, Richard Meridian himself. The elevator opened onto a plush reception area with expensive artwork and leather furniture. Motion sensors activated soft, recessed lighting as I stepped out. The corner office was behind a heavy wooden door at the end of a short hallway. I approached cautiously, EMF meter in hand. It remained steady. The temperature was normal. Maybe tonight would be uneventful. Then I noticed the light seeping from under the office door. According to protocol, all offices were supposed to be dark after business hours to save energy. I tried the door handle, locked as it should be. I used my master key, turned the handle slowly, and pushed the door open. The office was massive, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city lights. A large desk dominated one end of the room, with a sitting area of leather couches at the other. The light I'd seen came from a desk lamp that was now on, casting a warm glow over the polished surface. I knew for certain that this lamp had been off during my earlier rounds. Someone or something had turned it on. The EMF meter suddenly went crazy, lights flashing across its display. The temperature plummeted so quickly that I gasped, my breath visible in the suddenly frigid air, and then I heard it, that same raspy whisper from my recording. Watching, always watching. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I spun around, scanning the room, but saw nothing unusual. The voice recorder was running in my pocket, and my camera was in my hand, recording. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice steadier than I felt. "What do you want?" Silence answered me. The EMF meter gradually calmed, and the temperature began to normalize. After a few minutes of nothing happening, I approached the desk to turn off the lamp. That's when I noticed the computer monitor was on as well, displaying what looked like security camera footage. But not from tonight. The timestamp showed a date from 3 months ago, and the camera angle wasn't one I recognized from our security system. I leaned closer, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The footage showed what appeared to be a hidden camera view of this very office, but from an angle high in the corner near the ceiling. In the video, Richard Meridian sat at his desk, talking to someone seated across from him, my predecessor, the night guard who had quit without notice. There was no audio, but the conversation looked intense. Meridian was leaning forward, his expression menacing. The guard looked terrified, shaking his head repeatedly. Then Meridian opened a desk drawer and removed something I couldn't quite make out. The footage abruptly cut to a different camera, this one showing a stairwell I recognized between the 47th and 48th floors. The same stairwell where Martin Geller had died in 2009. My predecessor was backing up the stairs, hands raised defensively. Meridian advanced on him, now clearly holding a knife. There was a brief struggle, and then I turned away as the guard tumbled down the stairs, his body coming to rest in exactly the position described in the article about Geller's death. The footage continued, showing Meridian calmly descending the stairs, checking for a pulse, then using the guard's own radio to call for help, feigning shock and concern. My mind raced. This wasn't a supernatural occurrence. This was evidence of murder, possibly multiple murders if Geller's death had been staged the same way, but who had turned on the computer, who had queued up this footage for me to find. As if in answer, the monitor changed to show a different video, this one a live feed from a camera I didn't recognize. It showed the security desk downstairs where I should have been sitting. The desk was empty, of course, since I was up here. But then a figure walked into frame and sat down in my chair. It was Richard Meridian. He looked directly into the camera, directly at me, and smiled. Then he held up his phone, showing me the screen. On it was a text message ready to send. Night guard acting erratically. Threatened me, coming up to 49th floor now. My blood turned to ice as I realized what was happening. Meridian was setting me up just as he'd done to my predecessor. He knew I'd discovered his secret cameras, his hidden surveillance system that he used to monitor, to watch everything that happened in his building. That's when I understood the whispers I'd been hearing, watching, always watching. It wasn't a ghost or a supernatural entity. It was Meridian's victims trying to warn me that I was being watched just as they had been. The distortions I'd seen on camera weren't spirits. They were glitches caused by Meridian's secret system interfering with the building's official security cameras. The shadows, the footsteps, all of it had been him, moving through the building at night, monitoring his illegal surveillance network. And now I knew too much. I had seconds to decide what to do. If I ran, I'd look guilty. If I confronted him, I'd end up like the others. My only hope was to secure evidence. I quickly took photos of the monitor showing the murder footage, then pocketed my camera and voice recorder. I needed to get out of the building immediately and go straight to the police. I turned to leave and found Richard Meridian standing in the doorway. Fascinating what you can see when you're really watching, isn't it, Miller? He said, his voice smooth and controlled. I've been watching you too, your little ghost hunt. Very entertaining. He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. I noticed he was wearing gloves. You know, the others figured it out eventually, too, he continued conversationally. Geller was actually quite resourceful. Found 3 of my cameras before I had to stop him. Your predecessor was quicker. He caught me reviewing footage one night, bad timing on his part. Why? I asked, trying to keep him talking while I looked for an escape route. Why all the surveillance? Meridian smiled. Information is power, Miller. You'd be amazed what people discuss in what they think is the privacy of their offices. Trade secrets, merger plans, personal indiscretions. It's all very valuable to the right buyers. He took another step toward me. But that's not really your concern right now, is it? Your concern is how you're going to explain breaking into my office in the middle of the night. How you're going to explain the threatening messages you sent me. He held up his phone again. I've already called the police. They'll be here soon. I backed away, bumping into the desk. No one will believe I threatened you. There's no evidence. There will be, he said simply. On my secret cameras. Such a shame. You seemed like a stable person when we hired you, but night shifts can be psychologically taxing. People snap. He was between me and the door. The only other exit was the windows, and we were 49 floors up. I was trapped, or was I? An idea formed, desperate, possibly suicidal, but my only chance. You're right about one thing, I said, reaching behind me to grip the edge of the desk. I have been watching, but not just the building. I've been watching you too. His smile faltered slightly. What are you talking about? Martin Geller might have found 3 of your cameras, but I found 7, I bluffed. Including the ones in your home. I know about the offshore accounts, the meetings with Kimura Holdings. The arrangements with Judge Castillo. I was throwing out random names, hoping to hit on something real. From the way his face drained of color I had. You're lying, he hissed. Am I? Check your email. I set up a deadman switch. If I don't enter a code every 12 hours, everything gets sent to the FBI, the SEC, and the Washington Post. For a moment, doubt flickered across his face. Then his expression hardened. Nice try, Miller. But I don't believe you. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a knife, the same one from the video. Now, we're going to take a walk to the stairwell. You're going to have an unfortunate accident. And this time, I'll make sure there's no evidence left behind. As he lunged forward, I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed the heavy desk lamp and swung it at his head with all my strength. The impact sent him staggering backward. I didn't wait to see if he recovered. I bolted for the door, yanked it open, and ran for the elevator. Behind me, I heard him shouting, his footsteps pounding after me. The elevator was too slow. He'd catch me before it arrived. Instead, I veered toward the stairwell, the same one where Geller and my predecessor had died. I burst through the door and took the stairs 3 at a time, descending as fast as I dared. Meridian followed, his footsteps echoing in the concrete chamber. He was gaining on me. I reached the landing between the 47th and 48th floors, the murder site, and hesitated for just a second. That was my mistake. Meridian caught up, grabbing my jacket and spinning me around. The knife flashed in the emergency lighting. You should have just done your job and kept your head down, he snarled, bringing the blade toward my throat. I jerked backward, losing my balance on the edge of the step. For a sickening moment, I felt myself falling, just like Geller, just like my predecessor, history repeating itself. But as I fell, I grabbed Meridian's arm, pulling him with me. We tumbled down the stairs together, a tangle of limbs and sharp edges. Pain exploded through my body with each impact. When we finally came to rest at the bottom, I was dazed, bleeding, but alive. Meridian lay beside me, not moving. His neck was bent at an unnatural angle, eyes open and staring at nothing. The knife had ended up buried in his chest, his own knife, a fitting end. With shaking hands, I retrieved my camera and voice recorder from my pocket. Miraculously, both had survived the fall. I had the evidence I needed. I tried to stand but collapsed as pain shot through my leg. Broken, probably. Using the wall for support, I dragged myself toward the door to the 46th floor. I needed to get to a phone, call the police. As I pushed open the door, I glanced back at Meridian's body. It was gone. Panic surged through me. Had I imagined his death? Was I more injured than I thought? Then I saw the blood trail, leading from where he had fallen toward the stairs going down. Somehow, impossibly, he was still alive, still moving. I couldn't pursue him in my condition. I needed help. I hobbled down the hallway of the 46th floor, looking for a phone, an office with people working late, anything. The floor was deserted. Motion-activated lights illuminated my path as I dragged myself along, leaving my own blood trail on the expensive carpet. My vision was starting to blur around the edges, shock and blood loss taking their toll. I reached an office with the door ajar and collapsed inside. There was a phone on the desk. I crawled toward it, every movement sending fresh waves of agony through my broken body. Just as my fingers touched the receiver, the lights went out. Not just the lights in the office, all the lights. The entire building had gone dark. Emergency power should have kicked in automatically, but nothing happened. I was plunged into absolute darkness. From the doorway came a raspy whisper, watching. Always watching, but this time it wasn't coming from a recording or a distant corner. It was right behind me. I turned, squinting into the darkness, and saw a figure silhouetted against the faint glow from the windows. Not Meridian, something else, something that moved in a way that wasn't quite human, that seemed to flicker and distort like the anomalies I'd seen on the cameras. "Who are you?" I gasped. "We are the watched," came the whisper, now seeming to emanate from multiple sources around the room. "We are the seen but unseen, the heard but unheard." More figures appeared, materializing from the shadows, transparent, distorted human shapes. I recognized some of them from employee photos I'd seen. Jeller, my predecessor, the cleaning lady who had quit, others I didn't know. "He watched us all," they whispered in unison. "Caught our secrets, our shames, our final moments, and now we watch, always watching." I understood then. The surveillance hadn't just recorded people, somehow, impossibly, it had captured parts of them. Their energy, their essence, fragments of consciousness trapped in the digital web that Meridian had woven throughout the building. "I tried to stop him," I said, my voice weak. "I have evidence. I can expose what he did." "Too late," they whispered. "He comes." The door swung wider and Richard Meridian staggered in. He should have been dead. The knife was still embedded in his chest, but his eyes were alert and burning with hatred. Blood soaked his expensive suit, dripping onto the carpet. "You see them too," he said, his voice gurgling slightly as blood filled his lungs. "The glitches. I thought I was going insane. They started appearing on my cameras years ago. Watching me, judging me." He took another shambling step forward. "I tried to delete them, to purge the system, but they kept coming back, more of them, watching, always watching. I tried to back away, but my broken leg wouldn't cooperate. I was trapped between Meridian and the desk. And now you'll join them," he rasped, reaching for me with blood-stained hands, but before he could touch me, the spectral figures converged on him. They passed through his body like smoke, but each transit seemed to drain him further. He gasped, clutching at his chest, his eyes widening in terror. "No," he wheezed. "No, you can't. I'm still alive." "Watching," they whispered as they circled him, faster and faster. "Always watching," Meridian screamed, a sound that cut off abruptly as he collapsed to the floor. This time he didn't move again. The spectral figures turned toward me. "Thank you," I said, assuming they had saved me. "I'll make sure everyone knows what happened here." But they didn't dissipate. Instead, they drew closer. "You've seen," they whispered. "You know, now you join the Watchers." I realized with horror what they meant. They hadn't been trying to warn me, they'd been trying to recruit me. Another consciousness to add to their collective, another pair of eyes to watch from the digital shadows. "No," I protested, trying to drag myself away. "I'm not like him. I was trying to help. All who see must be watched, all who watch must be seen." They surrounded me, their transparent forms overlapping, merging into a swirling vortex of distorted features and limbs. I felt a cold unlike anything I'd ever experienced seep into my bones, into my mind. My vision began to fragment, breaking into pixels like a digital image corrupted. I tried to scream, but no sound emerged. The last thing I remember is the sensation of being pulled apart and reassembled, my consciousness stretching across multiple planes. The pain in my body faded as I became less solid, less human. And then I was watching through camera 47, as the morning security team discovered 2 bodies on the 46th floor. Watching through camera 62 as police cordoned off the scene. Watching through camera 84 as detectives reviewed footage that showed Meridian attacking me, but nothing of what came after. I tried to communicate, to reach out through the system, but all that emerged was that same whisper, watching. Always watching. That was 3 months ago. I'm still here, trapped in Meridian Tower's surveillance system with the others. We watch the new night guard, a young woman who hasn't noticed anything strange yet, but she will. Sometimes when the building is empty in those dead hours between 2 and 4 a.m., we can manifest more strongly. We can move small objects, create cold spots, whisper warnings that no one heeds. We watch, we wait, we whisper. And sometimes, when I concentrate very hard, I can make myself visible for just a moment. A distortion in the air, a shadow moving independently, a glitch in the camera feed. If you ever find yourself working the night shift in a tall building, pay attention to the cameras. Watch for the watchers, listen for the whispers, because we're watching you, always watching.